the United Nations, the hotspot of all international negotiations. Nevertheless, we must not forget that negotiations don't only take place in the United Nations or similar institutions. Negotiations are part of our daily lives. Undoubtedly, the reality is that we all typically, in some way or another, negotiate in our everyday lives. Therefore, negotiation has become an increasingly important issue in the current interconnected and competitive world in which we live in. Therefore, as Fisher and Ury have stated in their book Getting to Yes, by far one of the most, if not the most important and influential books in terms of negotiation of the last 30 years, that, like it or not, you are a negotiator. Negotiation is a fact of life. We cannot deny, therefore, the importance of becoming a fruitful and successful negotiator in today's context. Certainly, one of the main aspects I would like to draw away from this book is the fact that positional bargaining has proved to be highly unsuccessful and ineffective in the negotiation process. The dilemma of choosing to be either a soft negotiator or a hard negotiator, for me, has become obsolete. And the third way presented by Fisher and Ury, the so-called principled negotiation method, is for me much more effective. In terms of the positional bargaining, when negotiators bargain over positions, they tend to lock themselves in these positions. Therefore, they start not paying attention to the underlying causes of negotiation. They don't pay any attention on the interests, the challenges, their priorities, and they don't listen to the other parties because they are locked in their own position. Therefore, I believe this way of doing negotiation is very, very ineffective. In addition, Getting to Yes illustrates the danger that positional bargaining poses and the threat that it poses to the negotiation process, given the fact that it can actually impede negotiation. I would like to stress that, as Ury and Fisher have mentioned, standard strategies for negotiation often leave people dissatisfied. This is the case of positional bargaining. It cannot be stated any clearer. Positional bargaining, I want to reinforce that it has become obsolete. And certainly, the most important aspect I would like to highlight from this book is the principled negotiation method. This method, as opposed to the positional bargaining one that I already explained, decides the issues based on their merits, rather than on a process focused on what each party said or that they would or wouldn't do. Therefore, with principled negotiation method, we can achieve successful outcomes and wise outcomes in an efficient and effective way. We have 3 stages to this process. The first one is the analysis, the second one is the planning, and the third one is the discussion. Throughout all of these stages, we have to gather lots of information, generate ideas and new additional options, and finally, we have to find and achieve mutually advantageous solutions. Therefore, it is not an easy task to implement this method because one has to prepare in order to achieve successful outcomes from a negotiation. It is completely critical that we mention there are 4 basic pillars for the principled negotiation method. The first one is people. We must separate the people from the problem. So therefore, we have to be soft on the people but hard on the problem. Remember that during negotiations we're dealing with people, so emotions are very important and we cannot fully detach emotions from our negotiation process. Therefore, communication plays a key role, because actually without communication there is no negotiation. As stated by Fisher and Ury, negotiation is the process of communicating back and forth for the purpose of reaching a joint decision. Therefore, we have to impulse an effective communication. We have to understand each other when negotiating, We also have to pay lots of attention to what the other parties say, and finally, we have to avoid misunderstandings. The second pillar is that we have to focus on interests, not positions. That this is a tremendous change in regards to the positional bargaining, because with this new method, we have to explore interests. We have to avoid having a bottom line and being locked into our position. Instead, we have to look to the underlying interests, challenges, criteria, everything during a negotiation. We have to focus on reconciling interests, so not positions. All parties have different positions, but they are underlying interests that we have to look for, as parties may actually share some of these interests that are not so obvious. The book exemplifies this by using the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty of 1978 case study, in which both parties were involved in a discussion over the Sinai Peninsula. On one hand, Israel's interest was over security, because they didn't want a militarized zone near their country. But on the other hand, Egypt's interest was based on sovereignty and regaining the Sinai Peninsula. Consequently, the reconciliation of interest made it possible that the Sinai Peninsula was given back to Egypt with the condition of demilitarizing this zone. This was clearly a success in terms of compatible interests, because both parts were able to share the same interest without locking into their positions. Therefore, we must not forget that the most powerful interests are basic human needs like security or recognition, economic well-being, etc. So, finally, I would like to stress the fact that talking about interests with other parties should be a priority. Then I'd like to continue with the third pillar, which is about options. So we must generate a variety of possibilities before deciding what to do. For this, boosting creativity is imperative during negotiations, because it facilitates the development of several options and invent new options to choose from. And these new options, can possibly lead to achieving win-win scenarios. Fresh and innovative ideas are therefore fundamental, and they should merge the interests of both parties. Creative ideas are often the result of running brainstorming sessions. So the book says planning and brainstorming is actually very important in order to stimulate individuals and to think like outside the box. And therefore, we should make an effort to push our thinking beyond our limits, and always look forward to invent and create new ideas. So, as Fisher and Ury have stated, our brainstorming session frees people to think creatively. And finally, the fourth pillar is about criteria. So we must insist that the result should be based on objective standards, and therefore objective criteria should be utilized.
3 principal questions arise in the book. First of all, what if they are more powerful? So, what if the other parties to a negotiation seem to be more powerful than you are? Well, in these cases, Fisher and Ury recommend that prior to negotiation, you should prepare what they call a BATNA, which stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. BATNA is an effective alternative to adopting a bottom line during negotiations, since it too prevents you from accepting unsuitable agreements, but allows for greater flexibility in the creation and selection of imaginative solutions. As stated in the book, knowing what you are going to do if the negotiation does not lead to agreement will give you additional confidence in the negotiation process. Therefore, it would also serve to improve your negotiation skills. Secondly, what if they won't play? What if the other parties to a negotiation stand in a firm position? In these cases, firstly, you should thoroughly encourage them to use principled negotiation, just as you are doing. If this doesn't work, you must avoid entering into a positional bargaining situation. Rather than attacking their position, Fisher and Ury suggest the utilization of negotiation jiu-jitsu as a way of looking beyond the other party's position. You must look for added value and hidden interests and concerns. I believe that this method encourages us to put ourselves in others' shoes, using the understanding of their point of view in our favor. This approach is very pragmatic. Finally, if the other part still refuses to enter the negotiation game, the introduction of a third party as a means of mediating is recommended. Throughout the book, this is referred to as a one-text procedure. Following up with the historical case study aforementioned, one of the most recognized one-text procedures was by the United States in 1978 when mediating between Egypt and Israel. The United States listened to both sides, prepared drafts and recommendations to achieve a win-win scenario, and acted as a mediator and third party between both contesting parties. This was actually a success. Thirdly, what if they use dirty tricks? Dejectedly, the use of dirty tricks is an expanded practice, meaning that unquestionably you will have to face the use of dirty tricks in negotiation at some point of your life. These can include psychological warfare, lies, threats, pressure tactics, etc., etc. History has proved that neither reciprocal dirty tricks nor appeasement are the solution. In relation to the former, you must aim at separating people from tactics and avoid attacking them for using a tactic that you consider as unethical. If they get defensive, this will of course be a drawback for you. Therefore, you must still be concentrated on your main goal of achieving a successful outcome from the negotiation. In terms of the former, i.e., appeasement, just take the lack of military response to Hitler's occupation of the Sudetenland and subsequently of all Czechoslovakia. As a result, making concessions or too many concessions will make you look weak. An alternative to these two approaches implies identifying these dirty tricks and actually questioning the tactic's legitimacy. Discussing them with the other negotiator can make them less effective. As stated in the book, bringing it up explicitly will probably prevent a recurrence.
So, for me, this book undoubtedly has presented the topic of negotiation in a very innovative way, far from what personally I had been accustomed to. I believe that it has provided me with further insight as to how negotiations should be carried out in order to be successful. It has also made me question my way of approaching negotiations, and I think it has truly helped me in improving my negotiation skills into becoming a fruitful negotiator in the future.